Carlos Sainz magic secures the Spaniard pole position for the Mexico City Grand Prix as Max Verstappen deals brilliantly with late Q3 pressure to join the Ferrari driver on the front row. However, the big story comes from Q1 as Sergio Perez, the home hero, and McLaren's Oscar Piastri were eliminated. From Racing News 365, my name is Nick Golding, and I'm delighted to be joined once again by lead editor Ian Parks. Ian, Sainz absolutely magic in qualifying. He said it was almost the perfect laps because it was two brilliant laps in Q3. And I'm sorry to do this to Carlos, but despite how incredible he was, we've got to start with the beginning of qualifying, something I don't think we've ever actually done in an F1 update, starting by discussing Q1, but we simply have to. Sergio Perez, the home hero, out in Q1. He'll start P18 provisionally, one place behind Oscar Piastri, who he was out of Q1 through a driver error, exceeding track limits on his penultimate lap in Q1. Sergio Perez, more just down to a lack of pace, P14 for him in FP3. And a remarkable stat with Piastri. He was so quick in FP3, a session he topped, that his time from third practice would have actually put him sixth on the grid, but nevertheless, an absolute horror show, a nightmare for both Perez and Piastri.
I am going to start with Carlos Sainz, and do you know why, mate?
Go for it.
I'm going to gloat, because for once,
here we go.
I actually got a bold prediction correct. You asked me on Friday night's F1 update for my prediction, and I said Carlos Sainz, and he delivered and then some. But yes, let's move on to Q1. Let's start with Q1, and a quite extraordinary Q1, because you'd have to be a true mystic to have predicted that both Oscar Piastri and Sergio Perez would exit Q1. Maybe not so much Sergio Perez. I think that was the fifth or sixth time this season he's exited Q1, which is an absolutely appalling stat, bearing in mind the car that he is driving and what his teammate Max Verstappen has been able to do with it, and did do with it yet again throughout practice, throughout qualifying today, Saturday. I have to bear with myself for a second then, because we're recording this in the early hours of Sunday morning, and of course we're trying to talk about Saturday. So,
and the clocks are about to change.
And the clocks in the UK are about to go back an hour, and across Europe, etc., about to go back an hour as well as we approach that hour. So it's all slightly confusing for us folks, but hey, we're laughing our way through it and putting on a brave smile. Just quite remarkable scenes. I mean, as I say, you might have predicted Checo going out after seeing what happened in FP3. Again, he wasn't on the pace, struggling quite clearly. And it seems that not a practice session, not a qualifying, not a race goes by that we do hear a different excuse from Checo with every single session. And on this particular occasion, it was to do with his brakes, that the car wasn't doing what it wanted under braking. And he said this is something that's going to carry on into the Grand Prix. So heaven only knows where he might finish in the Grand Prix, bearing in mind what he was referring to. Sounds like he's trying to make his excuses already for not getting into the top 10, when quite clearly that is a car that should comfortably be running in the top 10, if not the top 5, as I say, when you see what Max Verstappen can do with it. So it already looks like it's going to be an incredibly difficult Sunday for Checo Perez in front of his home fans. You only had to hear the groans from the grandstands at the end of Q1 when it was evident that he hadn't escaped it. But to have Oscar Piastri alongside him as well on the penultimate row of the grid, now that for me was the bigger shock. Coming out of FP3, it looked quite comfortably that the McLarens were head and shoulders above everybody else. There was a comfortable gap. I think it was over 0.3 of a second to Sainz in third.
Yeah, it was.
So looking very comfortable, very easy. Certainly the temperatures were welcome from the McLarens. And at the start of Q1, The sun was out again. The track temperature was actually 10 degrees warmer than it was at the end of FP3, so everything seemed to be playing into the hands of the McLaren. And Lando Norris, for him, top Q1 quite comfortably once they got onto the soft tyres. But Oscar Piastri, made mistakes both on a medium run initially in Q1 and then especially on his first soft tyre run, where he was actually doing really well. First and second sectors, he was going to produce a time that I think quite comfortably would have got him into the top 15. But then he ran wide at turn 12, lap deleted. And it was at that particular stage as well, when the lap was deleted, it was a question for McLaren of, do we call him in and try and do a quick change, quick refuel, put on fresh soft tyres? Will there be enough time for him to go round and start a new lap? Or in the end, do what they did, which was basically a slow cool down lap, recharge the battery and go again on the same set of soft tyres with which he'd just had the lap deleted. They went again, and in the end, it was just nowhere near good enough. And Oscar, for the first time this season, does not make Q3. And up until today, Saturday, he was the only driver that had managed to reach Q3 for every single Grand Prix this season. So that's quite a setback for both Piastri and in particular McLaren, given the Constructors' Championship fight and the way that's going, with Ferrari in particular now looking like the strongest team when you consider Carlos Sainz on pole, Charles Leclerc starting fourth. So it looks like that 48-point cushion that McLaren has over Ferrari at the minute in the constructor standings looks like that is going to be whittled down by a fair number of points if both Ferraris take the checkered flag.
It's going to be fascinating to see just how far into the points or even into the points Perez and Piastri can get. Let us know in the comment section below for those watching this video where you think those two drivers will recover to. And whilst you're at it, can you go on?
Go on. I was just going to add a point on that because you just referred to that there, Nick. Bear in mind, Lando Norris started 17th in last season's Mexico City Grand Prix. He went on to finish 5th. And so Oscar has turned around and said that he's going to be doing some homework and studying exactly what Lando achieved last season to try and replicate that. So don't rule Oscar out from at least a top 5 finish if he can repeat what Lando did last season. Sorry,
so absolutely.
Nick.
No, of course. It's a very, very valid point. Piastri's homework on Norris from last year was certainly doing some wonders. And of course, for those watching, let us know in the comment section below where you think they're going to recover to. And whilst you're at it, please subscribe to the Racing News 365 channel. As currently over 90% of you are not, we would love you please to subscribe. That would help us get through these, well, quite horrific recording timings because it is, oh, look, it's 1 a.m. Brilliant stuff. But we're still going on strong. You mentioned, whilst discussing Perez, Max Verstappen managing the Red Bull issues. We saw on Friday, there was a power unit gremlin for Verstappen, obviously the floor damage in FP1. In FP3, he was complaining of no front or rear grip, yet looked pretty decent in qualifying. But actually, you mentioned track limits with Piastri. Verstappen as well in Q3 saw his first lap deleted for track limits, putting all the pressure on his shoulders to deliver the goods on his final Q3 lap. And that's exactly what Max did, despite not having a car that looks as strong as the Ferraris, perhaps not even as strong as the McLarens. Yet it's the 3-time world champion who's won in Mexico City the last 3 seasons, who joins Carlos Sainz on the front row.
It's just Max delivering again. Yeah. You know, this is what the guy is all about. When push comes to shove, when the pressure is on, when the chips are down, Max delivers. And as you say, he produced a good, solid first run in Q3. That was good enough for second position at that particular time behind Carlos. But as you say, lap deleted. But as I say, chips down, pressure on, and he produced the goods. And that's exactly what you expect of a driver of Max's caliber and capability, to respond when the going gets tough. And okay, his lap wasn't good. His second lap wasn't good enough for pole position. But in fairness, Carlos's first lap in Q3 was so good that even Max was unable to better that, regardless of what Carlos achieved with that second lap. And he was the only driver to dip under 76 seconds for a lap so far this weekend of the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez. So great performance from Carlos. Equally as good performance in my book from Max Verstappen.
Yeah.
Lando Norris on third, Charles Leclerc in fourth, and of course we have the longest run into turn one on the Formula One calendar. We've seen some fantastic stuff over the years. It just lends itself to a great start to a Grand Prix. Look at what happened to Checo Perez last year. Went hell for leather into turn one, overcooked it, and that was him done out of the race. Could we see something similar tomorrow? There's a lot to play for. Carlos, nothing to lose. What does he do? Does he stay out of the way of the championship protagonists directly behind him? Or does he think, what the heck? I have got nothing to lose. I'm just going to go for it. And it's all about controlling the start off the line. If you're able to get a good, clean start, lack of wheel spin, then most definitely you are going to get a good run into that turn one. And between the four of them, it could be absolutely anybody's. It could be absolute chaos. We do not know. As I say, I'm looking forward to this one because the top four guys right now in the championship are the top four guys on those top two rows of the grid. So it's going to be an absolutely brilliant start, I'm sure.
I can't wait for it. Let's talk about Carlos briefly, because a quite phenomenal performance by the Spaniard. We've seen in the past that when drivers find out mid-season that they won't be sticking with their team for the following year, they can sometimes go off the radar a little bit. Carlos, despite the fact he's leaving Ferrari, not through his own choice, obviously going to Williams, he's done so well to continue pushing not only himself but his car. He is so eager to get one final win for Ferrari before departing. Lewis Hamilton's probably looking at Carlos's seat and thinking, that's my car next season, bring it on. But for Carlos, though, he has kept his head so high. And what a lap. What a 2 laps. That doesn't make sense, but it's very late. Give me credit. But, a remarkable performance by him, and actually has every single chance of winning on Sunday.
And we are witnessing exactly why James Vowles, the Williams team principal, pushed so hard to get Carlos Sainz in that car. I remember having a conversation with James, and he turned around and mentioned that he started making overtures to Carlos, let's put it that way, in Abu Dhabi last season. Now, of course, this was a time when Carlos, as far as he was concerned, was going to be a Ferrari driver for as long as he could wish for.
Yeah.
Needless to say, Carlos had got no clue that just less than 2 months down the road, from February 1st of this year, he was going to be out of a seat because Ferrari decided it wanted Lewis Hamilton. You got to wonder when Carlos does produce performances like this. And it's one of those where he's been able to show just exactly what he is capable of. Yes, he has the odd blip now and again. Most drivers do from time to time, but for the most part, he has been reliable. He has been consistent. He gives his all, as we have seen again today. As you say, he's decided not to think, oh, well, I'm buggering off next season. I can't really be bothered that much, just do what I can here and there. No, he wants to go on a high. He wants to go out playing his part in, for him, helping Ferrari win its first constructors title since 2007. So that's what's on the line here for Ferrari. A lot at stake. And he wants to go out with his head held high. And, as I say, I played my part in that, delivering the team that title, the first one for 17 years. That would mean an awful lot to him, for him, going on to Williams next season, where, of course, yes, it's going to be a hell of a lot different. But this is exactly the type of driver that Carlos Sainz is, and exactly the type of driver that James Vowles wanted driving Williams forward over the coming years.
Still got a few topics we need to whiz through because it's been a very busy 24 hours. And obviously, let's talk about Lando Norris because starting in P3, a position which has been won from multiple times in Mexico City. But of course, for McLaren and Norris, a very busy 24 hours, a couple of hours after we recorded the F1 update post Friday. Of course, it came out that McLaren's right of review into Lando Norris's 5-second time penalty from Austin last weekend had been rejected. That's not going to be overturned. But of course, then something else that happened on Friday was a driver briefing between the FIA and the drivers regarding Verstappen and Norris's incident, let's say, from last weekend. And of course, we've now learnt that changes are going to be made by the governing body to the racing guidelines. A busy day for the names of Norris and Verstappen. I mean, they're just always in the headlines at the moment.
It's been that way ever since last Sunday, pretty much, obviously, for quite some period of time now, obviously, with these two guys being the main protagonists in the Drivers' Championship. But yes, we all know what happened on lap 52 of the United States Grand Prix. Yes, McLaren decided to exercise its right of review to try and get the Norris penalty at least looked at again, in the hope then of potentially getting it reversed or at least something altered with regard to the way it unfolded. McLaren believing in particular that Max Verstappen should have had a penalty for forcing Lando off track, therefore necessitating Lando's overtake around or off track coming out of turn 12. A lot of the drivers have had their say on this coming into this weekend, and they felt that within the drivers' briefing, it was the appropriate forum to try and get this cleared up, because with what happened at the Circuit of the Americas, we've quite clearly come across a grey area in these, what's known as the driving standards guidelines. Now, for the layman, even for the media, we don't have copy of those. It's not like it's a published work, so to speak, on the FIA where you have the sporting regulations and the technical regulations. It doesn't exist in print or online. It's simply for the drivers only, for their eyes only. But at least they have been able to speak with the FIA about this or these grey areas to try and now turn them into more black and white regulations going forward. And it seems that for the next two Grand Prix, certainly this one, Brazil, more than likely Las Vegas, that the current driving standards guidelines will be adhered to as they are written. But it seems that from the Qatar Grand Prix onwards, there will be something presented to the drivers for them to effectively rubber stamp, and those will then be the guidelines going forward. Hopefully, that will be good enough then that we then see incidents such as those during the United States Grand Prix no more, or at least if they occur, then the rules will be rigid enough around them that we won't have all this controversy that has since followed.
And hopefully, obviously, coming out of it, it'll mean that it'll make everything clearer, not only for the drivers, but obviously for us working in the industry, but also for the fans, most importantly, so that hopefully come the end of a race, the three drivers that are on the podium are the three who should actually be on the podium. I think that's what we ultimately want. When the check flag's flown, that's the end of the race. And any discussions of who's in the top three, just to quickly whiz through the top 10. Carlos Sainz is on pole position with Max Verstappen joining him on the front row, Norris in third, Leclerc in fourth, George Russell, and Lewis Hamilton in fifth and sixth. K-Mag in seventh, Pierre Gasly in 8th, Alex Albon P9, Nico Hulkenberg P10. A few shocks from 7th to 10th because of Yuki Tsunoda crashing in the final seconds of Q2, triggering a red flag, hurting the likes of Liam Lawson, for example, and also Fernando Alonso. To finish things up, Ian, Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton in particular, George did very, very well given his big crash in FP2 to recover to qualify in 5th. But Lewis was quite happy with the car in third practice. Toto Wolff said that as well to Sky Sports F1. We've heard that quite a few times, that the 7-time world champion's been happy with the car and feeling in a comfortable place. But then again, the same comment he made after qualifying is that the car felt completely different from FP3 to how it felt in qualifying. It's a recurring comment he's made. And again, he came out with the phrase of three-wheeling, that there is quite clearly something fundamentally wrong with the W15 that himself and Mercedes just can't put their finger on.
And he also came out with the bizarrest comment that I think I've heard from Lewis Hamilton for a long, long time, where he turned around and said, "I can't wait to see the end of the race." I genuinely cannot recall Lewis coming out of a qualifying session already looking ahead to getting the hell out of wherever he might be and on the next flight out on, to wherever he might want to go next. Just very, very strange from Lewis. And you almost now get the impression that also he can't wait to leave Mercedes either, given the way the performances have carried on since we returned from the summer break. I think we discussed it only recently that, Mercedes was in a good place going into the summer break. It had won 3 out of 4 Grand Prix. 2 of those were on merit, both from Lewis at Silverstone and at Spa-Francorchamps. Mercedes looking very healthy, coming on strong. We were expecting a strong challenge from them over the second half of this season, post-summer break, and it's just all gone incredibly wrong. To such an extent, as I say, Lewis turned around and saying, "I can't wait to see the end of a race." I've never heard that. Genuinely, I don't think, in all my years, I've heard Lewis come out with such a comment like that. We saw what happened in Austin. He wasn't happy there. As you say, lap 3 spin, described the car as three-wheeling, 40-mile-per-hour gust of wind, meant the car was buffeting and bouncing, and again, just couldn't hook up the car in qualifying after enjoying a really decent FP3. Toto Wolff, as you pointed out, said on Sky Sports that Lewis had commented to him that he was in a good spot. He felt good about the car. Lewis said no changes were made other than a tweak to the rear wing, which was to actually help downforce and then hopefully increase the speed. But again, just relatively nowhere, certainly in comparison to the top 4 guys.
Yeah.
And obviously, you should throw Oscar Piastri into that mix because, for all intents and purposes, Oscar Piastri should be at the front of that grid. But we've discussed him in depth as to why he wasn't on this occasion. But nevertheless, Oscar most definitely had a car that should be on the top 2 rows at least. But other than that, Lewis, yes, nowhere. Effectively, 6th is still somewhere. It's still reasonable, but in his eyes, in Mercedes' eyes, that's not where they should be.
You would imagine Mercedes are hoping of some lap 1, turn 1 chaos, which brings us nicely to our bold predictions. And actually, that's something I'm going to predict. I have a feeling, I don't know who between because I'm not a psychic, but I've got a feeling we're going to see something controversial between some of the big names at the first corner. But I also do think Carlos Sainz is going to win. I just think the stars are aligning from a Mexico City. Sainz to win for me.
It certainly looks like that Ferrari also has decent race pace, as well as incredible one-lap pace, certainly in hands of Carlos Sainz. Yes, Charles Leclerc was 4th. That's pretty decent, but Charles, by his own standards, described himself as being nowhere across practice and qualifying. However, he is confident of the race pace in that car. So it wouldn't surprise me if we see a Ferrari 1-2. I'm actually going to go with the fact that, because I also believe the McLaren has good race pace, but I don't think we're going to see Max Verstappen on the podium.
Interesting predictions. And of course, for those who are watching this video, let us know your bold predictions in the comment section as well. It's been amazing seeing an increasing number of you getting involved with our videos and letting us know your predictions for the sessions in particular. And of course, this one being the race, let us know in the comments below. Ian, amazing stuff as always. Finishing just before the clocks go back. This has been the latest episode of the Racing News 365 F1 Update. Join us after the race on Sunday. See you later.
If the clock's going back, Nick, does that mean we've got to do this all over again?
I hope not.
No, definitely not. Take care, folks.